That's right. Welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad. My name's Dave Momper. I'm your host. This is a fatherhood podcast for new dads and soon-to-be dads. I'm a new dad myself, and I'm asking every day, great dads, what does it take? What does it truly take to take on the ultimate role? All right, let's get to it. Mr. Josh Bonacci, a.k.a. The Real Bill Brasky. Welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad.
Thank you, Dave Momper, aka D Monster. Pleasure. Sorry this took so long to get together.
Man, you're building. Well, you're fortifying a career. You're just stacking critical experiences and opportunities. So I understand, and maybe that's a good place just to start off. Give some context to our listeners. For as long as I've known you, you've worked in the investment field. At one point, you were in New York City, and then the paths of opportunity led you to California, and in particular, you're in the Bay Area. Where were you living?
In Lafayette, California, about 25 miles east of San Francisco.
And then was it 30 days ago? 15? No, it had to have been 45 days ago or so. Job opportunity shows up back in New York City, and you're headed east. In fact, that's where you are right this moment.
I am. I'm here in a little furnished apartment for a 2-month stint as I wait for the family to make the move out here. I've been doing the commute every weekend. I go back Friday night, see the family, see the kids, come back here Sunday night, do it all over again. So this is the 7th week of that, 2 more weeks to go, and then they'll be out here sometime in mid-November.
Yeah. Well, props and congrats on the new opportunity, the new job. And yet I recognize it's been and we'll get into this, but it's been it's challenging leaving your family behind for a little while, knowing they're coming, and then just quick little doses of goodness in between working your tail off.
Indeed, yeah. It's the kids have been okay with it. They don't fully understand what they're getting into. Like,
Sure.
they're excited. It's a new house, right? Jaden, my oldest, who's 6, he says he's mostly excited about the move, but a little bit nervous because of the new school. Vic, I mean, he's a nuanced character. Sometimes he tells me I should just move here. Sometimes he says he wishes we would just stay there. Other times he just doesn't even know what planet he's on. So I don't really know what to make of him. I'm sure it'll be a tough adjustment for him though, because he just started kindergarten with a teacher he loves that his older brother Jaden had last year. And then Liv is 3. So like, as long as her mama's there, that's all she cares about.
Yeah.
But as far as like the back and forth goes, Vic's been the only one that's been pretty emotional, which is hard to see.
Yeah.
When I take off on Sundays, and but we FaceTime once or twice a day for at least a few minutes, and we just pick up where we left off on Saturday, and I leave again Sunday, and they'll be out here soon.
Yeah. And you just kind of got to weather. I don't know if it's a storm, if that's the exact metaphor, but kind of got to weather that, and then everything will settle down here. And what a cool time, get everybody together for your new home around the holidays in New York City. And I know you're not living in New York City, by the way. Where are you residing once you settle down?
I'm going to be up in Connecticut, assuming all goes as planned. We're in contract for a house there.
Beautiful.
I have no reason to believe it won't go as planned, but sometimes life goes in different directions than you would expect. But I'll be working in the city every day. No more remote work, just doing the train, the old-fashioned way.
Wow, that is pretty retro of you.
It is. I'm an old school guy now.
Yeah, exactly. So, serious question: how many push-ups did you do to prepare for this conversation?
No push-ups. I did a lot of pull-ups though, just in case you wanted a bicep shot. But
yeah, right.
Push-ups are tomorrow.
So I just love how we've never lived in the same place, with the exception of a couple months. You stayed with your dad in Highlands Ranch, which was across the street from my uncle. and they were pals enough that your dad was like, "Hey, my son's moving in for the summer," and I suspect my uncle was like, "Oh yeah, you'll have to meet Dave." And I swear to God, I came back. That was summer between freshman and sophomore year of college, and because of your influence, although not all positive, mostly positive influence, I came back and I remember uh, all of my closest friends were just like, "What have you been doing? What have you been doing, Dave?" Because I had put on just an absurd amount of muscle, kicking ass in the gym every day with you. So thank you for setting the trajectory of my brawn. And I just had so much fun with you that summer.
Yeah, it was a good time. And to be fair, while I already was, into working out, you certainly increased the slope of the intensity that summer because I too came back to college and people are like, "What steroids are you taking?" So it was a two-way beneficial street there for sure. And I really wish I could remember like our initial play date that my dad and your uncle set up. I don't
Sure.
remember our first introduction at all, but
Yeah, it was probably the front yard or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean that was a fun summer, and then we've had the good fortune of seeing each other in the ski towns of Colorado, in New York a few times. Even was it Minnesota or Wisconsin where we saw each
Duluth,
other?
Minnesota.
Duluth, Minnesota. So right on the
Mhm.
edge there. Yeah, man. I mean, we've done a great job of staying connected over all these years, and now an absolute pleasure to call on you and ask you some questions about fatherhood.
My pleasure.
So let's maybe pick up on this move. Like, what's the what's the experience for you as a father picking up your whole family? How it's going to affect your wife? How it's going to affect your kids? Navigating that process. Hopefully, I mean, what's your thinking about it, and what have you actually done to make it, you know, streamlined or a gentle transition, knowing that it's, can be a massive thing depending on the age of the kids. I know you shared with us a little bit, but what has been the thinking of you about this entire endeavor, and then the process you've approached it with?
It wasn't an easy decision. If the new job had been in San Francisco, it would have been an absolute no-brainer. It was out here, clearly a much better opportunity with, you know, much more potential than where I was. But it was really an exercise in, am I doing this for me or for the family? And it took a while to figure that out, right?
Well,
Because they're not necessarily, aligned 100% all the time. But I think ultimately, given how unhappy I was with my previous job and just uncertainty around its longevity anyway, given that I didn't know how long that office was going to be in existence. And if I had stayed, would they have forced my hand to move anyway?
mm,
Right. So ultimately, I was like, maybe this is my chance to just take my destiny into my own hands. Again, clearly a better work opportunity. And though it requires the uprooting of my three kids, my wife, who's done a great job of ingraining herself in the community and making a lot of friends, it still seemed like on the balance is better for everyone. Because ultimately, if you're not happy with your job, which is where you spend 40, 60, sometimes more hours a week, you're not going to be very happy at home, which isn't going to really be good for the kids anyway.
well,
So it seemed like after a lot of deliberation, it made sense, despite again, the as they would call it, high switching costs. Right? We love our house. So many memories there. Brought the kids home from the hospital. The kids learned to walk. They rode bikes there for the first time. All these things. Measuring how tall they are against the wall. Very special years that it's going to be impossible to replicate that somewhere else, just definitionally due to the passage of time. But they're still young enough where we think, moving somewhere, new house, that could still feel like home to them. Maybe not next week or, next month, but within 6 months, that's going to feel like home. They're not even going to remember this house in 10 years.
true.
Right. And, you know, it just ultimately, it seemed like the better thing to do. And, all things considered. So, I'm going through the pain right now, which we already talked about. It's been stressful having to sell one house, buy a new house, and figure out the logistics of uprooting the kids mid-semester to start in a new school. But it's just we have the inertia now. There's no turning back. So now you just gotta do your best with the hand you're dealt, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're creating, I was appreciating in our discussion leading up to actually hitting the record button, just, kind of a soft landing for your kiddos, the transition, spend a little time with the grandparents, let the moving company get all your possessions to the East Coast. And hopefully, as you said, by mid-November, things will settle down. Is the goal Thanksgiving in your own home? Or are you going to, that sounds,
Absolutely. The wife and I are talking tonight. Seems they're booking their tickets from Wisconsin to New York for November 13th.
okay.
So, assuming we have a house by then, we should be good to go by Thanksgiving. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. That's great. That's great. And then, I don't know, just on a personal note, I'm curious, what do you, I know you had to make this decision, such a valuable thing to hear. Like, am I making this decision for myself or for my family? And I appreciate that vantage point so much and getting clear on, why you're doing it and making sure, I would suspect making sure that you're doing this for the family, but also a piece, of Josh needs to be fulfilled. And they kind of go hand in hand if you do it for the family, I suppose. But I mean, personally, just knowing what I know about you and the city and the industry you're in, like, what are you most looking forward to about recreating a life in New York City?
It's going to be wonderful to have access to the city. And San Francisco is a city, but it kind of pales in comparison to New York in terms of its offerings and things to do with the kids. And not to mention in Connecticut, there's a couple larger cities too that we'll have immediate access to. Stuff that used to take, you know, great effort and an hour plus in the car is now in some instances like an aquarium, 10 minutes away, right? Um, but all like my two older kids are really into the musicals. So we're gonna have a ton of that. The museums to get to see the T-Rex skeleton. And just the sort of easy access to my office. I'm hoping that Friday afternoons after school, they hop on the train with mom and just come pick me up at the office. We get dinner, do something fun in the city, and come back.
Hmm.
That wasn't really an option in San Francisco, especially once my office moved, out of San Francisco, kind of into the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
So, looking forward to having that access to a real city with relative ease. Um, and that's it. But also, like, ironically, we spent 5 years, 6 years total in California in the San Francisco area. I never went in the water once there.
Oh,
Whereas now we're living 1.8 miles from a beach, right? So I think that's gonna be a lot of fun too. Probably not like 8 months of the year, but those four
sure.
months is gonna be pretty cool.
Amazing. Yeah. No, no, West Coast, January 1st ice baths, huh?
No, no. Despite my Michigan upbringing with proximity to Lake Superior, I am
Ah,
not a fan of cold water.
so no cold therapy for Mr. Bonacci, huh?
No way, Jose.
That's amazing. Okay, so I'm curious, this new role of yours, maybe describe a little bit about the magnitude of the role, managing people, managing money, of course, but I mean, what's it like to be a leader at this age in Josh's life? And then in particular, give me some context about your role. But what I really want to explore with this podcast at large and our conversation is kind of like how you view leadership and then things that you might think of as critical characteristics or skills that when the time is right, you're imparting them on your kiddos.
Sure. So it's a startup fund, right? So the scope of leadership will be limited to just, three or four people, more junior than I am, right? So there's gonna be like about seven of us total. The team will grow with time, assuming all goes as planned and we raise more money to invest. But it's exciting. We literally don't have phones right now. We got printers several weeks into the job. Like we're building everything from the ground up. Like operationally, we don't even actually literally have a way to send money if we wanted to do a deal right now. So part of what was so enticing about this was the ability to build something new that I could feel ownership of, or at least partial ownership of, right? And really help to as part of like the creation of the platform itself, also be one of like the guiding forces of the culture, right? Which I think you can actually maintain a culture in a smaller place, whereas I think it's a lot harder in a bigger place. I mean, I think you're more of an expert on this than I am, 100%. I think even in a larger institution, the sort of the upper management's attitude and their view of employees and the business is certainly going to trickle down. But I think it's a much more intricate sort of infiltration of what we're trying to create when it's such a smaller team, right? Like it's much more just the close proximity and the constant contact makes it easier to sort of imbue what you're trying to create on those around you.
Totally.
So excited about that too. And then you asked, how does that potentially ultimately pertain to raising kids and leadership, right? I think is actually really similar. My view on leadership isn't necessarily based upon any leadership books. I maybe read one over the last like 20 years. But ultimately, I think leadership is about striking like the exact right balance of providing autonomy and guidance for your subordinates, right? You want to maximize their contribution because I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to feel valued. And you feel valued if you are able to contribute to your full potential. You don't want to be spinning your wheels, and that's where the guidance comes in. But I think everyone needs a fair amount of autonomy to actually feel as though that they are contributing something versus just sort of a monkey on a typewriter, right? Like,
For sure.
and that's ultimately no different than raising your kids. You want to give them the flexibility to explore and be creative and figure out who they are and what they like. They need guidance clearly so they don't self-destruct or jump headfirst off the kitchen counter. But there's certainly the need for autonomy too, right? And letting them feel as though you're not micromanaging them and looking over their shoulder and judging them all the time.
No doubt. I like that you pointed out culture. I was just in this conversation with somebody who speaks on, like a keynote speaker capacity, speaks on culture, and he had this really beautiful sentiment that struck me as a new dad, where he runs a tech firm. I think they're only at 70 people. They're out of Colorado Springs, so he was acknowledging still pretty small, and you have a little bit more of a you have more stewardship of culture. And he noted, culture doesn't end at at 5 o'clock, and culture doesn't exist only within the confines or the walls of your organization. Like, culture ripples out into families after hours, and then perhaps the community, the neighbors in the neighborhood, and how you know if you're building something special, you kind of take it another degree out there and think about how what's the ripple effect on the experience you're creating, the setting you're creating, the conditions that you're creating for your employees. And just kind of struck me like it almost goes the opposite direction too. If you're like fostering love and uh, you know excitement and fun and uh, just playfulness inside your home, can you bring that into the office? I don't know if there's not a distinct line. I don't know that you're not allowed to have fun in the office or something. So it's like, what can I bring in these positive family sentiments into the culture, and can I also extract positive things from my culture and take them home with me so that everybody's thriving in a sense. So I'm excited to hear how you build this. I mean, uh, 7 people to what? What's like the next couple of years look like if you're hitting benchmarks and pacing where you hope to go? Is it 100-person firm in 2 years?
No, we never want to be large.
Okay.
Um, I mean, we haven't talked in depth about this because we still have the training wheels on right now, but in one conversation we've had about sort of like the end state, it's like max 20 people.
Hmm.
And in the asset management business, there's certainly been a trend toward just accumulating as many assets as possible under management, really generating a ton of fees on those assets, absorbing other asset managers to sort of just perpetuate the flywheel, if you will. But we don't want to fall into that trap. The idea is we want to focus on what we like to do, which is investing. And at a certain point, the more capital you raise, the more it becomes about just feeding the machine,
Hmm.
and less creative. And that's not the goal.
Ah. So is there a creative aspect that draws you to this world, or is that just a bonus?
No, in this role, and we haven't gotten into this on this conversation, but another another thing that I found super enticing was that this was going to be more of a thematic, research driven approach to investing versus in most places doing what I do. It's more a reactive, just explore any deal that lands on your desk versus proactive idea generation based originations.
Hmm.
So we're going to think long and hard about, what segments in the whole financial ecosystem are sort of most plagued with like supply demand imbalances. Where do we think that we can add value just by virtue of the teammates that we have, by our ability to sort of roll up our sleeves and do work where other firms won't, for any number of reasons, right? Certain asset classes can be overlooked by the larger asset managers, even the smaller ones too. But ultimately, we want to generate at least 80% of our deals based upon this proactive outreach process, where we think long and hard. We literally have dedicated blocks of time in our schedule each week to just generate ideas,
Hmm.
and then you know ultimately, if to the extent like we kind of verbalize them internally, I think they're interesting, then do a deep dive, like put together white papers on them, figure out the best way to actually participate in those industries. With whom should we partner? Where in the capital stack should we be deploying our money?
Hmm.
And so it's much more creative, and a lot of that is just a function of us having very flexible capital. Whereas generally speaking, you have pretty tight guardrails about what you're able to do within most firms.
Yep. Dig it, man. Well, I'm checking in with you every 6 months and just get an update on things. I'm totally rooting you on, of course. But
Hopefully, I'm
you're
looking a lot more energetic and awake in 6 months. Cause I'll tell you, these have been some long days so far.
yeah, and I know you're not you're not afraid of the grindstone for sure.
No,
And despite feeling perhaps a little rough around the edges, you're looking great. The backlights, by the way, and the jawline, like the audience, the viewing pleasure is at a strong 10 right now.
well, it's really modest of you to wear the beard to cover your own chiseled jawline.
So a bit of a gear shift. I'm just, we played this out of touch as we were kind of getting situated, but you have three kids, and at one point you had three kids under 4 years old. Was that the right math?
That's right.
So I'm dying to hear, what kind of quagmire that was and how beautiful it was at the same time. But I almost want, before you get me there, I just want to picture Josh Bonacci as the expecting father of his firstborn. What was going through your mind? Tap back into, I suppose, 7 years ago ish. Jaden's on his way. And what were you thinking? What were you feeling as a up and coming new father?
I don't think you have any idea of what it actually feels like. You have an idea of what it's going to entail. You know you're going to be tired. You know you're going to feel this overwhelming love for the child, right? It's impossible to actually like explain that to someone until they've actually experienced it themselves. And I know you can attest to that.
Sure.
It's like it opens up like this sixth sense, the emotion being the sixth sense that you didn't even realize you had, like this all encompassing, feeling of love. It's just it's odd, right? Like that you can never prepare for. I think I was probably like any other ignorant dad. You go to all these classes, you read these books, and you feel like, okay, this is how it's going to go. Like contractions are going to be this far apart and then this far apart, and everything's going to be really easy. And it never goes like that, of course, right? You don't even know if you're in labor at first, and then all of a sudden, like you're about to have a baby. it's
Yeah.
um, it's pretty exciting. But yeah, it was. I think leading up to it, frankly, I really enjoyed knowing full well that my days of absolute freedom were coming to an end. I certainly enjoyed my days in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Did an excessive amount of pub crawls, and really just lived the life until up until like it became that point where like labor was possible. Then you had to kind of back off and like just be in standby labor mode, right?
Yep.
But yeah, I don't.
And
Our, our
you were gung ho to be a dad
Absolutely. I was
versus
gung ho to be a dad.
yeah, yeah.
We had been trying a little while, and like just because we were a little older when we started, we were worried, right? It didn't happen right away. And so when we found out that, the wife was pregnant, um, yeah, we were absolutely ecstatic. And it's just so fun to tell everyone, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the best. You're just dying until like that 12-week mark to start telling people.
Yeah. How did you announce it to the locals?
Gosh, I don't remember at this point. Um, I honestly don't remember. I'm pretty sure both of our moms cried. Um, but yeah, it was just over the phone because neither of us live by our family. The conversation starting to come back to me a little bit. But yeah, it was like a FaceTime conversation. Oh, hey, by the way, Aisha's pregnant. Um, yeah,
No big
just to really
deal.
catch them off guard. Um, so yeah, in any case, it was wild, right? And the first one's just it's special because it's new, right? And you know, ultimately, like we were talking about, like the first one, the life change, the magnitude of life change is a 10 out of 10, right? On the 10 scale. Second one's still exciting. And this one's actually pretty funny. Like we weren't necessarily like trying. Like Jaden had just been born. He was like 6 months old. I actually took a pregnancy test. Um, we were in bed, tired. I went and looked at it because, it takes a few minutes to actually materialize one way or another. I look at it and I was like, no, nah, it's fine. That's that you're, free and clear. She wakes up in the morning, goes and looks at it, and she's like, I'm pregnant. There's a pink line on there. And I was like, yeah, but it was just kind of faint. I didn't think that counted. So, totally misread it. Typical second child, already before he was even born, barely conceived, and he's already being, sort of overlooked.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing.
so in any case, the magnitude of change for number two is like a 5 out of 10 because you know what you're in for. Still more work. You no longer have like the opportunity to like take shifts, right? And like get a little free time here and there because all of a sudden there's just two of them. So it's one-on-one at that point. And then having the third one is just like an 8 out of 10 again, just because we're, outnumbered and they're all young and very needy and wanting attention as they should. So, that sort of up the stress level back to sort of, you know, first child levels again.
Yeah. It's like a 7.25 on average right there across the gauntlet.
Yeah, I think that's probably, yeah. I would say more like 7.67, but yes.
Yeah,
Um,
something in there. Leave it to the investment specialist over here. So, what's it like right this moment? I mean, I know you're away from them too, so perhaps there's this asterisk next to this answer, but imagine 4 months ago. What's it like to manage, to enjoy, to play, to put them to bed? I mean, just give me a day in the life.
yeah, so the boys, they're all still well behaved. Honestly, I'm really lucky. They have these hatch night lights. I don't know if you have that,
Mm.
wherein you can change the color at a certain time
Oh,
to
yes,
indicate that it's
we
time for
do
them to
have
get out
that.
of bed. So their light turns green at 6:30 in the morning. They hit the ground and literally run out of their room to our room to wake us up at 6:30. So excited for the day. Like I don't remember what that feels like. I know I used to feel like that when I was 5 and waking up my mom.
Yeah.
Um, but their enthusiasm is just amazing.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
they'll jump in the bed with us, talk to us for a little bit, and they're like, okay, we're gonna go watch TV. Um, so they go down, assuming it's a weekend. And then, I follow shortly thereafter, drink some coffee, hang out with them. And then just depending on the day, there's any number of activities or birthday parties. I mean, when you've got like three of them, like the number of birthday parties or practices is just like, you can't actually anticipate having any hobbies of your own for sure. Um, but it's busy, it's nonstop. And since the day our third was born, like you're outnumbered, and you just feel like you're always letting one of them down because they all need you, and you don't have enough of you. And it's sort of like a constant feeling of failure in a sense, because like you always got one kid like pulling on you, like, why aren't you paying attention to me, right?
Hmm.
And it's not like they're going without attention for like a half hour. It might be 30 seconds as you're addressing the
Right.
immediate fire drill at hand because someone needs a granola bar or something, right?
Yeah.
Um, but that's stressful. You feel like you can see the merits of spacing them out a little further if one were young enough to do so when they embark on the parenthood journey, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, now that they're like 6, 5, and 3, they all play together, which is great. Massive synergies there, and we're starting to see little breaks in the day where they'll all be playing Magnet Tiles or Marble Rush or something, right? And next thing you know, the wife and I can actually talk for 3 minutes without being interrupted.
Hmm.
Rarely, don't get me wrong, very rarely. Like we just look at each other and laugh now. My wife and I'll be trying to talk, and like both of us are being like bombarded by questions from the kids. It's like
Yeah.
entirely impossible. But we've literally, I think we've passed the stage of frustration and now just are in the acceptance stage and just laugh about it.
Yeah. I was wondering about the flip side of this because I can see it just being a madhouse, three kids under four, and now, seven, would you say, seven, five, and three? Three? Is that about right?
Yeah, the oldest is almost 7, and then
Okay.
the other's 5.5, and youngest just turned 3.
So, it's evolving, but eventually there will be some silver lining to this, and you're getting hints of it. I just can imagine the little rat pack running around together, thick as thieves, raising a little hell, and hopefully not doing anything too too nefarious, but you can kind of count on them to be, friends perhaps based on their grouping, their age grouping, more so than maybe. I mean, I was three and a half. I was no, I was 2 years and 11 months. I was 3 years, you know, round up, but with my younger brother, and that was almost just like the right on the edge of I was an older, I was a big brother who picked on my little brother versus was best friends with my little brother. I don't know if that was exactly an age, if we can attribute it to age. It might just been my personality. But, do you sense that they're going to be just best buds and little ride or dies?
Um, yeah, definitely. Jaden and Vic, like I can't imagine what their day would be like without each other.
Yeah,
Of course, they have like blow up fights here and there, and they're both crying and mad at each other and say they're
sure.
never going to play with each other again. But then, like 3 minutes later, they're playing with each other again. Jaden's super patient, the oldest, with both the two youngins, and in the middle is now sort of befriending the littlest. Like they
Hmm.
will go and do their own thing now, play stuffed animals or something.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's an interesting dynamic.
So the
But I
middle
think
might be the bridge between the youngest and oldest, eh?
yeah, I mean, he certainly is more her speed, right? He's only 2.5 years older versus almost 4 years older.
Yep.
So um, that could be the case. We'll see. I mean, the youngest is our girl, right? And she's certainly the most assertive and bossy. I mean, the girls. I mean, I know it's cliche, but they're so much easier and smarter than boys at a young age. Like just the level of just self-reliance and taking initiative to do things. And this could also just be like specific to my kids, but like she's great. Like we call her the boss, as in boss baby.
Yeah.
And she she's a strong girl.
Amazing. And so what are they getting into these days? You mentioned they like was it theater or Broadway? Like that's going to be a nice touch when you're in New York, but what else are they into? And I guess I'm asking this partly just to hear from my friend, but I'm also thinking like how did you uncover what they love? What was that process or that approach to figure out athletics? This is what they like, and music and whatever it might be. How did you uncover it, and what are they into?
It was really just exposure, broad exposure. Like I'm not pushing any agenda.
Hmm.
We, they ultimately what they've landed upon is they like taekwondo. They don't like team sports, so they don't necessarily like interacting with other kids. They're very like maybe it's almost like the twin syndrome, like they just want to be with each other.
Mm.
Um, but aren't really into team sports. Like we were doing soccer for a while, but it seemed like they just weren't very into it, or definitely not the team aspect. They're okay like doing drills, but not like actually playing on a team. Um, Although they did play t-ball, but that again, baseball is basically an individual sport, right? Like it's, yeah, you're on a team in the outfield, but it comes to batting, right? That's what kids care about. And so for that, they for that reason, they warmed up to t-ball. And the thing they love the most is piano. They've both really, really taken to piano the last year and a half. And we don't push them. They have lessons once a week, but without a doubt, if they ever have downtime after dinner, just get bored playing with Marble Rush, they'll just go to the piano room and just start playing piano.
Hmm.
So it's just something they've gravitated toward. And as you can imagine, if there's something you just love and do it all the time, that's what you tend to excel at then.
Yeah, no doubt. It's got to be almost like I was just thinking how fulfilling it must be to watch them come across something they love and then to do it and have a little bit of a knack for it. So what's it like to see your kids playing piano? I mean,
Odd because I don't know anything. I can't read music. I've never. I don't
odd.
even know if I've touched a musical instrument, right?
Yeah.
But they're great. And ironically, Vic teaches me piano. He loves teaching me piano. So he'll pull up sheet music and be like, he'll patiently walk me through it. He's like so happy, jumping up and down, clapping if I do it right. So it's very cool. It's
Yeah, that's
a
amazing.
little special activity I have with my kids I never thought I would have. So I'm a big fan of it. Once they get out here, we're going to increase their lessons just because they love it so much and are really taking to it that it could be something that, which should be something that we nurture more.
For sure. Amazing. Yeah, little musicians on your hands, huh?
Yeah, they
Little
do little duets together
taekwondo.
now.
Are they?
So
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
it's amazing. And taekwondo, like, what's your sense of course, I guess self-defense. I'm not sure if taekwondo is that for sure versus, maybe jujitsu or Krav Maga that I know you like to get into, at least jujitsu. But in terms of like, I could just see taekwondo physical awareness, like bodily awareness, and just learning how to move your body and kind of be athletic and agile. I mean, what are you seeing as the appeal to taekwondo for your kiddos?
So I brought each of them to an introductory lesson in jujitsu at my jujitsu gym in California, and both of them were like NFW. Vic actually did my middle one, almost did the entire class, and at the end, once it got physical, he just wasn't having it. Um, Taekwondo, we were introduced to it through a birthday party. Actually, that one of the kids had a birthday party at his Taekwondo dojo, and then it got me thinking. I was like, my kids are very introverted publicly. Like with friends, they don't like talk. They're very shy, super shy. So I wanted something to boost their confidence. And if there was like an athletic component to it to boot, great, right? That's just gravy. But the taekwondo was fantastic because I mean, ultimately, we did it for their confidence, for them to learn like how to find their voice, to speak up in public, which they don't do at home.
Hmm.
And sure, there's also the element of respect. That's a big part of the class. They have like key words of focus each week, and oftentimes it's respect for parents, teachers, siblings themselves, and all that, which is great. And ultimately, those are the big things I wanted them to take from it. The physical component, they're not learning like self defense. It's really like that's just the icing on the cake. There's exercise, they do like agility stuff, all great, and they're sweaty, and that's all good. But for me, it's really the sort of the emotional and confidence components of it that I think is really really valuable.
Fantastic. What else is in there? Respect. I mean, I'm just trying to think of like these core foundational principles of being a good human or a great leader. What else is in the lesson, the toolkit of lessons that you maybe you've seen firsthand or they've come home and tell you about it?
Um, you're gonna make me rack my brain now. And oftentimes they're behind glass, so I can't even hear the word that they're doing.
Uh,
So I'm watching through the window. Um, but it's all serious character attributes that everyone should have to be a good human being,
Yeah.
right?
What I
So
mean, whether you've heard them or not, maybe give me as you think about stewarding, shepherding your kiddos into a future that they're highly capable, they're value add, they're resilient. I mean, what in a way I might have just said a few of them, but what are the attributes that you're consciously, maybe you and Aisha are talking through it and like, hey, we want to make sure that the three of them have this. Have you had that conversation? And even if you haven't, what are the things that you want to bestow on your kiddos?
yeah, I'd say that the top two from my perspective, and definitely the top one that we share, the wife and I share is confidence. Like we are over the top supportive of everything they do, encouraging them, applauding every little thing they do, sometimes maybe to a fault, right? Um, but like, I want them to feel good about what they're doing and to feel capable, which is another word you use, right? But ultimately, I want them to feel like there's nothing, no mental or physical barrier holding them back. They're 5 and 6 years old, right? They should be able to do anything that they want to do at this point. The bar isn't the NFL or NBA at this point. It's like very small things that they can do and enjoy insofar as they want to do so. The one that I take very seriously with them is just another one that you mentioned is resilience, right? Not giving up. And I think that's just of paramount importance in life. You've got to be a grinder. I mean, absent luck, like things take hard work and you just can't give up, right? Um, and I'm not talking about giving up, right away. I'm talking about keep trying. Like I'm not talking about the first failure, then giving up. That's absolutely unacceptable. I'm talking don't give up ever, right? They got to
Sure.
keep trying. If they want to be good at something, they've got to keep trying, whether it's t-ball or hiking, right? One of my kids is a great hiker, the other one is not.
Hmm.
And I keep saying you're never going to get good at it unless you do it. You just have to keep doing it and grinding away, and sooner or later you're going to build the muscles and the endurance, and it'll be easy for you too.
Yeah. And it must be the middle one, Vic, who's the all-star hiker, based on what you told me. Share with me
Yeah,
that
he's
little anecdote, by the way. That's just so beautiful.
oh yeah. So well, it kind of comes back to a bigger point, right? Which is like what are we feeling throughout the day? Like you asked me before, like how does the day go, right? But beyond that, like how do you feel? And it's overwhelming and it's stressful. And again, I think anyone who like cares about being a good parent is oftentimes going to feel stressed out and overwhelmed because you feel like you're maybe not doing the best job, despite your best intentions, right? We all certainly have our nights where we go to bed and say we could have done better today, right? But I know how this is going to sound, but at the same time, I think most people will relate. Oftentimes it gets to that nap time or the end of the day where you're brushing teeth and trying to get pajamas on and get them ready for bed. And sometimes you wonder like, am I enjoying this or am I just waiting for them to go to sleep? Right. Like, because you're really craving a break, right? And at the same time, these are such special moments. This is what it is to be a parent, and you can't like wish them away. But sometimes you're just tired. You got to do things. You want to take a shower. Maybe I want to go work out, right? And it's just like the only reprieve is when they're in bed. And I literally asked a guy at work, what I'm actually doing. Am I enjoying my time or waiting for them to go to bed? And he rightly said it's probably both. Like they're not mutually exclusive. You can be enjoying your time while also like looking forward to having a little time to yourself too.
Yeah.
But again, these are special moments, and it's front and center. I think I get targeted sufficiently on Instagram now about like little short videos about how fleeting this time is and how much you should appreciate it. And,
Yeah.
and going back to your point about the hike, I was on this epic 6.48 mile hike to the highest peak in our regional park with Vic. And I was on this trail, and it was, he and I'm just really savoring our time because I finally have a hiking buddy. I'm finally able to go hiking again now because at least one of the kids will go with, and I'm not leaving the wife with three. So now I
Sure.
kind of get a pass to go with
Yeah.
him. And then this guy came from the other direction, probably like 70 years old, carrying a camera, taking pictures. And he saw us and he said to me, he's like, "You are so lucky." And I knew what he meant, right?
Yeah.
And it was just like a real time, not like contrived social media post reminder of like just how sacred these moments are.
Truly.
So
Yeah, and leave it to a complete stranger who you know, could have been anybody. You'll never see him again. Can you picture that person's face?
I
Like,
can
yeah,
kind of, yeah.
yeah,
White hair, just your run of the mill 70-year-old guy just trotting along by himself. Who knows? Like if he had probably had kids that moved out and really understood the value of having kids that are still there.
yeah. Beautiful little moment there from a stranger. So maybe, ah, gosh, as much as we've seen each other over the years, despite never living close by, it's not enough. It's definitely not enough. It's like, yeah, wonder what Josh Bonacci, who has he become as a result of becoming a father? Like, what have you, what have you learned from your kids? You learned piano, for instance. Like this question kind of struck me earlier when you're learning a little bit of piano from, I think you said it was Vic, but it's like, what have you learned about yourself and about being a great man and in turn a great father, a great partner because you had kids that you perhaps wouldn't have had you not had kids?
And well, it certainly puts everything else in perspective, right? Like I think despite the fact that being a father is way important to me than being a good employee or good in my career, I actually think it makes me better at my career
Mm,
because sometimes you need a small step away or a small reduction. Like you need a step away to get perspective and if you're so wrapped up just myopically focused on one thing, which was work for me pre-kids, you sometimes don't do your best job because you're so narrowly focused. You don't have that wider sort of breadth of experience and emotion with which to approach your job, which I think ultimately makes you a better employee, certainly makes you a better leader and colleague, right? So I think that's one thing, right? Just that broadened perspective that again, despite work becoming a second priority, I probably got better at it by
mm,
de-emphasizing it, right? Just by default. And not to say I don't work hard, like I work super hard. But again, it's in the context of, oh, if I screw something up or a deal doesn't go my way or we lose a deal, whatever, I still have these three awesome kids, right?
mm.
So it takes the pressure off, where sometimes that pressure cooker just makes you slip up, makes you make mistakes, right? And I think having more balance, just I'm probably not properly articulating it, but having that other perspective, having that other emphasis and point of focus in my life takes the stress off of work, and therefore I'm able to see it through clearer eyes. Maybe that's the better
Yeah.
way of articulating. But then in terms of like what I've learned from my kids is something I'm still learning and only recently starting to learn. But like you'll understand too when Leo's a little older, right? But like they just don't have any appreciation for urgency, like zero. You cannot get them to hurry, no matter what. You also can't get them to be quiet, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they just have no appreciation for like the passage of time or like deadlines.
They don't even know what
And
time
they're
is.
so like they are like in this constant state of mindfulness, right? Like and that's really what I've just likened it to because they are so engrossed in the moment. They certainly don't have smartphones or smart devices or anything like that. They're playing with their toy. They do one thing at a time, right? And it's like the way we're supposed to live.
Mm,
And and it's all sort of it ultimately manifests in a complete lack of urgency and understanding like hey, we got to get here, practice starts in like 20 minutes or whatever, right? Because they don't think about that. They think about the thing they're playing with right then or the snack they're eating at that moment, and that
sure.
I think is really valuable.
So is that that's a forcing function leading to you being more present or more patient or more
More, I'm seeing the merits of the way they approach life, right?
ah,
I certainly am still beholden to deadlines and all that work
of
wise
course.
and otherwise, but it's just a constant reminder to just like be present and not be thinking about the next thing. Like I oftentimes, like you got things going on in your head, you're kind of talking to your kids, you're kind of paying attention, but you're always like, at least I am like halfway in my head. the majority of the time, right?
Sure.
And but then when I see them sort of like slowly moving around under no pressure, just enjoying literally the one thing, only one thing at a time, it reminds me to I need to also be more mindful, right? Be more present. And that's ultimately, I think, a really great lesson that again, it's new to me. I'm finally starting to appreciate why they are the way they are in terms of like, you know, you try to get their attention, you just can't because they're focused on the one thing they're focused on and they don't hurry. And it's just I get it now. And I think I should be more like that.
Yeah, right. Little, I just here going with the flow, in that present moment, and just surfing the moments, man. Just surfing the moments. Granted,
That's right.
reality smacks you across the face moments later because you had three big deals that you got to hopefully get across the finish line, and new employee coming up, and the train that you were riding home is no longer in service, and you got to jump over here. But some good stuff inside of all that. I'm curious how you're handling. You brought up technology and screens and devices. Like, what do you think? Were Are you an 80 kid? You were born in 80?
81.
81. So it's like our decades of childhood are drastically different than present day kiddos in their, from 5 to 18. I was, well, and I was also a small town kid. My father was a forester. We grew up in the woods in a way, like feral kids, just running around. Wouldn't come home for the whole day, just skateboarding and biking and all that and good stuff. And it's like raising a kiddo, let alone, you've got three and I've got one and probably more, but in this day and age, what are you most worried about, and how are you mitigating those worries or those situations? And I can just think of like social media devices as a kind of like a trap in a way, as one thing that you might want to minimize, mitigate, and but what else comes to mind, and how are you addressing even social media and so forth?
Yeah. I mean, we at least ideally we're not there yet and not forced to fight the fight yet, but we don't want any smartphones until at least high school. I'd like to wait longer. I'd rather than just have good old fashioned flip phones. There's also the element of not wanting them ostracized from like social circles in school. So you have to kind of balance that as well. But yeah, I mean, you don't need me to tell you how well documented the perils of social media are. So there's clearly I have a very strong aversion to it. I mean, personally, I don't participate, right? Like aside from like being targeted by, dad ads on Instagram, I don't
Right.
post anything. I don't spend time there. I've got my own view, right? But ultimately, I don't think the actual like sort of umbrella risks are gone or any different, right? Like
Mm,
bullying. I think they're magnified by stuff like smartphones and social media, which is all the more reason to keep them away from it. And it's just
that's a
it's
good
just
point.
like it's just and it the bullying through these platforms is just so cowardly, and there's nothing like everyone's sort of a keyboard warrior, right? And that starts early with these kids, and it's tough when you're that age. You just want to belong and be accepted. And if you're getting like negative feedback or horrible things said about you,
Sure.
effectively to your face, but yet behind your back because
With
someone's hiding behind their phone, that's got to be really, really hard to deal with. So I dread that stage, and I'm hoping there are more sort of child restrictions at that point in time that are more universally accepted, right? So that I don't have that broader societal sort of push
hmm
to like make them like basically force our hand and allow them to have these devices and access to these platforms in order for them to like have friends. But
right.
it's going to be tricky, and I think we're just going to play the field when we get there, right? Just like play
Sure.
the hand that's dealt at that point in time. I'm hoping that the dynamic changes, but we'll see. But yeah, I don't think the risks are different, right? You still got weirdo people out there. I think it's just more publicized now. Like And maybe just because of all the awful things that had happened, from the time we grew up until present times, now kids just don't have the same liberties, right? I don't think there's like a higher percentage of like bad people out there than there were 40 years ago. There's just more people. So maybe by virtue of of
Mm.
that, there's more bad people. But yeah, I think ultimately, that's my concern, right? Just I want them to feel sufficiently confident, going back to before, right? To know who they are, to not succumb to peer pressure, to not care what other kids say. I tell them, like they'll come home and tell me some ridiculous thing that one of their classmates told them. And I'll say, guys, you got to understand, like, kids don't really tell the truth a lot, right? Like, they may be trying to tell a story to be funny, or they may just not have understood what happened and told it wrong. But really, you should be careful about what you believe from kids, right? I'm starting to like, I don't want them like paranoid about every interaction they have. At the same time, I'm trying to plant the seed that like they really should discount what like their peers are telling them for the years to come.
Yeah. All the way until you're dead, by the way.
Basically.
Like it's not going to change that much, but I can see kids are embellishing and there's less consequence when when they lie, even if it's innocent and so forth. But no, I
Yeah.
like that
So
you're making some, the I like the point, like the umbrella risks still exist. Like bullying is inevitable. It's an inevitable part of kids' upbringing. Uh, yeah, strangers being weird strangers. Like what else is in there that categorically is a timeless thing? I don't know if there's another one or two on your mind. It's just a different medium now and a different playing field.
lots of
Uh,
fun because anyone can be a bully. You don't have to be like the 200-pound fifth grader to be the bully now. You can be the 45-pound fifth grader and be a complete jerk on your phone and just
uh,
ruin people, right? So
totally.
it widens the field of like who can be a total bad person, right?
Well, that just kind of shifted something for me because I'm pretty far away from this assessment and a determination with Leo being one, but it's not about necessarily revoking or keeping devices out of their hands as it is empowering them to be confident and resilient and kind. And those things were valuable even 20 years ago when we were or yeah 30 years ago when we were teenagers, but it's like the need or the value for resilience, for instance, is like socially, and then just the nature of the world and say the competitive landscape of business, it's like it's even more imperative perhaps. So that's why I want to explore these themes and figure out like what does it take to actually equip our little ones for the future that's right around the corner for them. So
And that kind of goes back to the top of the conversation, right? Where, how do I like want to lead, right? Especially as it pertains to my kids, and striking that balance between autonomy, and guidance so that they can sort of feel fulfilled. But that also establishes like a baseline level of trust from them in me and their mom, right? And I want to be able to keep that connection, that trust open forever. So like they don't need to feel completely isolated when kids are picking on them. They know they can talk to their mom and dad versus seeing us as like their jail keepers, right?
mm,
Which I think some kids, especially in those like early teen years, tend to do. But I want to be their confidant. I want them to be able to tell me anything, and I'm not going to be judgmental. I'll be pragmatic. That's the goal, at least. Um, but ultimately, it starts now, right? Establishing that baseline level of trust and openness and communication, right? Coupled with, of course, the confidence we talked about and the resilience to actually deal with these things, when they're alone, and mom and dad aren't there to protect them. But I want them to come home and say, hey, this happened. And at least let them know that like their whole world is not like their middle school class. Like those kids are a bunch of, animals. It doesn't matter, right? Like what matters is they're loved at home. That'll never change. And they should feel that like that solid grounding, right?
nice. So tell me this, as a father figure now, um, I knowing what I know about you as a longtime friend, I've got a sense that I bet you've trusted a lot of your intuition. You're a confident guy, resourceful, convicted, being stepping into the role of fatherhood. I don't see you struggling with that. But were there people in your life that you look to as like that exemplify a good father or a father figure that you're emulating to some degree? And who are those characters, and what are you infusing from their world into your world?
There were several, you know, grandparents, uncles, right? That I think showed the importance of like prioritizing children, right? And I know that should be obvious, but ultimately, like, I don't know that it's necessarily like an age-old trend that dads have a super active role in their kids' lives,
Yeah.
right? I think that's come more to the forefront in the last generation or two. I mean, even when we were growing up, not to like make us sound ancient, but like there's the machismo part of being a boy, right?
Mm.
Which wasn't necessarily like probably the best way to raise someone, right? In terms of like no crying, just toughen up, right? As opposed to like actually having a dialogue and understanding why the kid might be upset. And I
Yeah.
think that's changing now, right? So my point is, I think there's been an evolving sort of landscape in terms of what it is to be a father.
Mm.
And everyone does the best they can with sort of the precedents that they have and the
Yes.
tools available at that time. And now we're we benefit from all these other tools, all this research that's been going out there that I probably would have laughed at as a kid because it's so soft and like, not at all how like I was raised, but like at the same time, it's very valid and there's good reason not to be, I'm not going to go so far as to say something like silly like toxic masculinity. That's not at all where I'm going here. My
Sure.
point though is there should be a dialogue and it should be okay for like kids to talk about how they feel, not just told to like suck it up and like deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Rub a little dirt on it. It'll be fine. Although
exactly,
that is
exactly.
kind of
But
true.
I'm not saying that as in like an indictment on anyone in my life. I'm just saying God knows how they were raised, right? Like
Sure.
we're talking like, our parents and grandparents, they went through like hard times, like depression and like, a bunch of like really hard economic times based upon like our like geographically like specific conditions, the economic conditions they're in, right? They had hard lives. So I can't imagine my great grandpa had a ton of time to spend with his family. I mean, he was working, his whole life, super hard job, probably exhausted when he got home, right? Like, how much time did he have? Like, how much energy did he have?
Sure. And yeah, and the kind of state of mind, socially speaking, of what the father role did, and it was. I've heard this great alliteration, three P's: provide, protect, and prepare. And definitely the provide was like the emphasis, a couple generations ago or a couple decades ago. And then, protect and prepare a little bit, but less emphasis. Maybe protect still there, but that preparation, maybe how we approached it is drastically different or notably different at this point. But I got a killer question to tidy it all up. But anything else that you feel like is just a fun topic that you want to riff on?
Um, Gosh, I mean, there's so many, right? In the heat of the moment, I just like when we were interrupted before, it was by a text slash simultaneous FaceTime from my wife saying, "Hey, in case Vic brings it up, we don't need to dwell on this, but they're just in the shower. Vic fell and Jaden peed on him basically in his mouth. Jaden has already been reprimanded. Please don't bring it up. It's a sensitive subject right now." Right? Is this the sort of volatility of the moment to moment experience? It's just amazing. You just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, right.
But
So I mean, if you were, if you were in the present moment when all that went down, how does that go as the father? Are you laughing? Are you, are you like yelling, not yelling, but are you asserting your guidance, call it, or how are you managing these things.
There would be firm and loud guidance at that point, I think, because I can say that definitively because there's been a separate peeing incident on Vic in the shower that was also intentional. So,
Gosh.
um, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what inspired this, what inspires it on occasion, but hopefully he's going to get over it soon.
My gosh. And being so Jaden administered the situation on Vic, right? Is that right?
Intentionally on his head as he's laying on the ground because he just
As he's
fell.
floundering in the man. I had this just struck me as like the most the retribution my younger brother took on me as I mean, I was the big brother. I picked on him for sure. I adored him. We're great now, but you know, one day I'm showering and shampooing my hair and it just smelled weird. And I'm like, what the heck? And at first I thought, did he just pee in my shampoo? But he took an entire bottle of Nair and tried to put it into the shampoo. And, he's just playing the whatever little, because if he confronted me physically, it wasn't gonna go well for him. But so he was very industrious and
Did that
creative.
work?
No,
Did your
nothing happened, but you know, it stirred the pot up, right? So
well? So I'm guessing the
boys,
Nair was for your body hair issue, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly, right.
That's why it was
And
in your shower in the first
that was
place.
back when I was shaving my chest just to be svelte, and it actually was a bonus. I just, boys will be boys. That's probably not going to be the last time they're wielding their powers against each other.
But no, I mean, I'd say beyond that, like the the nature of the questions they ask, while also unrelenting, is completely random and at times just brain melting. It's absolutely it's funny, but at the same time, I think prolonged exposure could actually cause like irreparable mental harm to me. Like I'll get asked questions like who would win in a race, that plant or the ceiling? Or like Jaden, my oldest, is into all these books that's like one animal versus another. It could be like lion versus tiger or tarantula versus
Yes.
scorpion. Super popular books apparently in his library. Every week he's got a new one from the library at school. But then that just leads to multiple like variations of those questions. Who would win? Like two scorpions and one tarantula all day. I'm not kidding. I probably get 40 of those a day from him. Just hypothetical. Who would win questions and why? And who would I cheer for?
Oh my gosh, man. I'm sure you adore them in a smaller dose. They're adorable, right? They're just like the cutest thing in the world. And then eventually you're going, okay, yeah, this is too much.
Yeah, it comes down to that point, right? There's a breaking point where like again, especially being away so much right now, it's like I don't have enough time to hit the breaking point, but they will wear you down. It is a true test of my resilience for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but at the same time, these are things we're supposed to cherish, right? It's
for
just
sure. So,
sometimes I feel like they're reaching a little farther for questions than they really need to.
interesting. Well, I'll let you know once my little man begins tapping into his inquiry and can formulate sentences. I'm sure I'll get some doozies.
Oh, you
What are
will.
you doing to stay uh, vigorous as a man, as a father? This is the ultimate role. My ethos and my thesis on the role is that it truly is the ultimate role out of all roles we can potentially serve in. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's also very taxing at times. And then it just makes me wonder, how does Josh stay sharp and prepared and vigorous? What are your, you know, I know you're throwing barbells around and maybe some jujitsu. I mean, are those your things? How else do you stay focused and fired up?
Well, physically, I mean, I again, the last couple of months have been tough, but just weights. I'm done getting hurt in jujitsu. I informally retired about a year ago
Hmm.
after yet another torn muscle. Um, so now weights, cardio, nothing novel. Right now, it's just a war of attrition against old age, right? Like go in at least you just if it's only 20 minutes, just go in and do 20 minutes of something. But I feel like as long as I get myself into the gym, and it helps to have a home gym, as long as I get myself into there, And I just tell myself, okay, just do something easy. Just do like 3 sets of no weight. But then you start warming up, like, all right, I can do this. I can do this. And you ultimately do something a little bit more respectable than what you initially intended to do. But ultimately, I mean, we had kids late, right? And I want to be able to do things with them when I'm in my 50s because they're not going to be that old still, right? And it's well documented. You gotta maintain it, right? Because you have this slow, inevitable physical decline, and the best way to sort of mitigate it, slow it, is to keep lifting weights, especially powerlifting. So I'm doing that. I want to be, I want to live down the aisle in 40 years when I allow her to marry.
40 years from now. Yeah, man, that's going to be I'm literally thinking the same thing, you know. We're the same age and I'm a little behind you, right? So I want to chase Leo around for, you know, until my last day, if as much as possible. And I mean, how you pretty structured with your days? How when the family's in town in November, will you have a rhythm that you can get into, or are you just trying to fit in a workout or you know a grind session?
No, it's funny you asked that. We were literally today at work as a team exercise, independently, though ultimately we'll discuss as a team, putting our own personal goals and how they are beneficial to the team and then the broader firm. And
Mm,
one of my things was establishing a very firm, non-negotiable routine. I need that routine to thrive in. It's I need to get up at, I don't know what like the train times and all that are yet, but once I get to the new house, like I will have a set wake up time every day. I will lift weights, do whatever for whatever it is, 20 or 30 minutes, get the same train every day, come back on the same train every day, barring a work emergency. Spend like a sort of 6:30 to 8 o'clock every night, those sacred hours of like dinner time, bedtime with the kids, and get back to work if I need to. Otherwise, go to bed, do it again. And that might sound like I'm incarcerated. It's like somewhat like synthetically incarcerating myself, but like that routine gives me so much like ease and reduces my anxiety, like infinitely so. And I was
makes
able to
sense.
have that routine back in California. Here, I of course haven't yet found it, but it's discombobulating for me to not have it. I need to know what I'm doing and when.
Right, right, right. Yeah, you're on the fly, creating a plan every single day that's just tailored and different. That just sounds romantic, but also just crazy burdensome. I think frankly, I need a better routine myself now that and we're almost, we have this dynamic, we both work from home and there's less need for all that structure because of no commutes and availability but in the near term, probably, if not the intermediate term, I think it's going to be essential for us to really sort out our routine. And we've just been kind of winging it, a little bit of winging it. And it's been a treat,
Well,
but it's not going to
you're a new
last
dad,
forever.
right? It's not easy. You got a 1 year old. That's a hard
Yeah.
time.
Right, right, right. All right. Josh Bonacci, final question. The ultimate ponder, the ultimate walkabout. Take a moment as I ask you this to think about your answer. No rush, but I want you to picture a time in the future. We've got your three kiddos sitting around a campfire together. They've got the next generation of their family there, maybe a subsequent generation, and you're nowhere close by at least. Maybe you're beyond, who knows. And they're weaving tales, telling stories of the great Josh Bonacci, things that they admire about you that represent who you were, who you are, your character. What are those three things you hope your kiddos weave tales about?
Whoa, that is a big one. It's interesting, and I don't. I certainly didn't originate this thought, but like at your funeral, but even before that, your grandkids, no one cares about your professional success or how hard you worked, right? They care about like what kind of dad or grandfather you were. So that's certainly the context in which I want them to be talking about me, right? Because ultimately that's probably what would they be talking about, right? Because again, definitionally, no one's going to care. With the caveat being, I think it's, I don't even, it's not even a matter of me thinking, it's just a fact. If you're able to balance a successful, rewarding career while being a father, that's a lot harder than just being a father or just balancing a career, right?
Yeah.
So I think at some level, there will be some appreciation for that, right? Like I worked hard. I tried to like, you know, give everyone a good life, right? And so maybe that is or is not something at least like my kids talk about, like, you know, like they had a good life and they had lived in a nice house, got to go to nice schools, right? Hope maybe that's part of it. But more important to me is that like the way we talk about my great grandfather is how he was there for everything. He went to everyone's game, every kid game, every grandkid game, every grandkid game, like baseball or football or whatever. Like, I don't even care about what number 2 or number 3 were
Hmm.
compared to that,
Yeah.
right? That I was there and they knew me and I knew them. That's hugely important. I think 2 is obviously that in that context, they have positive feelings about my presence there, of course, right?
Sure.
I want them to think of me as someone that they could trust and talk to, right? That we had a relationship, a friendship, that I try to actually have a bond with them, not just like an advisory role in their lives.
Yep.
And then 3, hopefully they start to think finally my dad jokes are funny because I'm not getting a lot of love right now. Um,
That's
I think,
great.
yeah, I think that's all I got.
Gosh. So they're saying dad was always there. He made it to everything. He was so present and active in our lives. What a treat to have a dad like that. And they're saying he was our absolute confidant. You could come to dad for anything. You could go to dad for anything, and he would support the decision or the at least the thinking process. And lastly, he was moderately funny.
They'll think it's funny when they're dads themselves.
Of course.
You know,
Yeah.
it's funny. You don't, I don't think you certainly don't appreciate your parents until you become a parent, right?
Oh gosh,
So
no doubt about it.
and maybe on that note, maybe they'll appreciate my humor when they too are parents.
You're right. Yeah. All right. Well, Bill Brasky, absolutely a pleasure and an honor hanging out with you.
Thanks for
Uh,
having me. It's been great. Good to see you
Absolutely.
for an
Yeah.
hour straight or more, you know?
Right. Little a micro interruption, but we were anticipating that, and I can't wait to get settled in New York. I've got, as you know, friends and family out there, and now you're back. So I haven't been back to New York in ages, but I'm due, and I got
I
to
got a
get me
place for you.
beautiful. Well, we'll come visit you. Tell the wife hello, and I'll check in with you in a couple weeks, couple months, see how everything's going. Appreciate you so much. Thanks for joining me.
Sounds good. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, buddy. There you have it. That's been another episode of Whoa Dad, Go Dad. If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button, subscribe to the podcast so you get the future ones, and please spread the word and post this episode to your social networks. That's powerful. Perhaps the best thing you can do is share this directly with a new dad or a soon-to-be dad that you know personally. Let them know you're rooting them on. And indeed, drop a comment and be really a part of this dialogue on fatherhood with me. Let me know in the comments a question you want me to ask other dads, or just some feedback. How does this sound to you? What's helpful? What stands out about these conversations? I would appreciate that intel as I grow Whoa Dad, Go Dad. I've got many more episodes to come, and I'm so glad you're here. Looking forward to catching you on the next one.
Whoa, Dad, here we go now. Oh yeah, the ultimate roll now. Oh yeah, here we go now. Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.